My husband's mistress showed up at our vow renewal ceremony in a red dress. She walked down the aisle while I was standing at the altar in white, and when she opened her mouth to speak, I realized I'd known the truth all along. I just didn't want to believe it. What I did next changed everything. Hi, I'm here today to tell you my story. Not someone else's story, mine. And I need you to know right from the start that this isn't easy for me. For 3 years, I've rehearsed these words in my car, in the shower, at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. I've written this story 100 different ways in my head, trying to figure out how to make sense of it. Trying to find the right words to explain how someone can lie to your face for 18 months while you're sleeping in the same bed. But I think the truth deserves to be told. And I think there are people watching this right now who need to hear what I'm about to say. This is about love and betrayal. This is about the moment everything I believed about my life shattered. This is about discovering that the person I chose to spend my life with was living a complete double life. And most importantly, this is about what happened when I finally decided I was done pretending. So if you're ready, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. All of it. The ugly parts, the painful parts, the parts I didn't even tell my therapist at first. Let's go back. Let me take you back to where this all started. Not to the disaster, to before that, because you need to understand who I was, who I thought I was. I was married, 7 years, to a man I loved, not in that desperate, obsessive way, in that deep, bone-level way that feels like breathing, like existing, like he was woven into the fabric of who I was. He made me coffee every morning exactly the way I liked it, without me asking. After 7 years, he just knew. His hand would find mine in crowded rooms. He'd laugh at jokes that nobody else thought were funny, just because I was telling them. That's the kind of love we had. We met in a library, literally collided. I wasn't paying attention, walked right into him, sent his books flying everywhere. He looked at me for a second like I was insane, and then he smiled. That smile changed everything. "Well," he said, picking his books up off the floor. That's one way to get someone's attention. I didn't know it then, but that man would become my entire world. I'd build my life around him. I'd make compromises I didn't even recognize as compromises. I'd ignore warning signs so obvious in retrospect that it makes me ashamed. 3 years of dating. Then he proposed in that same library, between the philosophy and psychology sections. He got down on one knee, and I cried so hard a librarian came over to check if I was okay. The wedding was small, intimate. I wore my grandmother's dress. He cried when he saw me, actually cried. He wasn't someone who showed emotion easily. So in that moment, I felt like the most loved woman in the world. For the first few years, it was good. We bought a house. We had plans, the kind of plans young couples make. Travel, a bigger house someday, maybe kids. We talked about growing old together, becoming that couple people point to and say, "That's what I want." But somewhere along the way, without me even noticing, he changed. Or maybe I changed, or maybe we both did. It wasn't one big moment, it was 1,000 small moments that I chose not to see. And I think that's the part I want you to understand. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. The betrayal was that I knew something was wrong, and I decided not to look too closely. I decided not to ask the questions I already knew the answers to. I decided my own peace was worth more than my own truth. Let me tell you about the red flags. 7 years, that's what we were celebrating. 7 years of marriage to a man I thought I knew. He was always sentimental about anniversaries, always planned something special, a nice dinner, a weekend trip, something that showed he remembered what I meant to him, something that made me feel chosen. So when he suggested something different this year, when he said he wanted to renew our vows in front of everyone who mattered, part of me got excited. Part of me thought, oh, how romantic, how committed. But another part of me, the part I'd been ignoring for months, whispered, this is guilt. This is him trying to reinforce the image of a perfect marriage that's already rotting from the inside. Why vow renewal? I asked him. We've only been married 7 years. People usually do this after 20 or 30 years. He looked at me, really looked at me, and he said, because I want to make sure you know I'm all in. I want to stand up in front of everyone who matters and tell you again that I choose you." I wanted so badly to believe him. I needed to believe him. And for a moment, I let myself. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe all those suspicions were just me being paranoid. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe I was projecting my own insecurities onto a man who simply wanted to recommit to me. That's the thing about being lied to that nobody warns you about. How the liar can make you feel absolutely crazy for suspecting them. How a few sweet words can erase months of red flags. How love can make you complicit in your own delusion. I said yes. We planned it for 3 weeks out, the botanical gardens, where he'd taken me on one of our first dates. There was something poetic about that. At least I thought there was. I bought a new dress. White, elegant, simple. I got my hair done. I practiced my vows in the mirror, actually crying about how grateful I was to have a husband who wanted to recommit. I imagined him getting emotional during the ceremony. I imagined that this would be the moment we reconnected, the moment we remembered why we fell in love. The night before, he seemed nervous. He kept checking his phone, texting someone. I asked him who, and he said his brother, coordinating details. I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. The morning of the ceremony, I woke up to an empty bed. He was already gone, handling final preparations. He kissed my forehead and said, "See you at the altar." That was the last time he touched me before everything fell apart. The afternoon blurred together. My best friend helped me get ready. We drank champagne. She told me how lucky he was to have me. "He better treat you like a queen today," she said. If only she knew. By sunset, I was at the botanical gardens. The sun was golden, perfect. Our guests were already there, our families, our closest friends, about 75 people. The arch was decorated beautifully, white lights, flowers, everything perfect. I waited for my cue. The music started, our song. My father took my arm, and we walked out together toward the altar, toward him. And I saw him standing there in his gray suit, and his expression was complicated. It wasn't pure joy. There was something else. Conflict, guilt, fear. But I pushed that down. I was good at pushing things down by then. We got through the vows. I spoke about commitment and choosing him every day. My voice shook. He talked about loyalty and trust and spending his life with me. The irony was suffocating. Our families were crying. Our friends were crying. It was beautiful and heartfelt and completely false. And then the officiant said, "I now pronounce you married again," and the doors at the back of the garden opened. Everyone turned to see who was arriving late. There was this moment of collective confusion because nobody had invited anyone else. Everyone who was supposed to be there was already there. And then she walked in. She was tall, probably 5'10". She had long dark hair that was styled perfectly. She was wearing a red dress, not the kind of red that's elegant and understated, the kind of red that demands attention, the kind of red that says, "Look at me, I'm here." She walked straight down the aisle toward the altar like she owned the place, and I watched as David's face went completely white. For a moment, nobody said anything. The music stopped. The officiant looked confused. Our guests were all turning to each other with expressions that ranged from shock to intrigue to disgust. And then she reached the altar, and she spoke. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice loud and clear, carrying through the entire garden. But I couldn't let this happen without saying something. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Who are you?" I heard myself ask, though my voice sounded very far away, like someone else was speaking with my mouth. "I'm Jessica," she said, "and I've been sleeping with David for the past 18 months. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever experienced. I could see my mother's hand go to her mouth. I could see David's mother's expression shift from joy to horror. I could see my best friend Maya standing up from her seat, her face a mixture of shock and fury. But I couldn't feel anything. It was like my body had gone numb, like I was watching this happen to someone else, from very far away. "What?" I said. My voice didn't sound like my voice anymore. "I'm telling you the truth," Jessica continued. She looked at me directly. "I know this isn't the time or place, and I know you probably hate me right now, but he promised me he was going to leave you. He told me he was going to tell you this weekend. He said he was ending this charade of a marriage and we were going to start over. I looked at David, my husband, the man I'd promised my life to, the man who, just moments ago, had promised again to love and cherish me in front of all our loved ones. "David," I said, his face was crumbling. He looked like a man who was watching his entire world collapse. "It's not," he started, but Jessica cut him off. "Don't lie," she said. "For once in your life, don't lie." And the thing that broke me most in that moment wasn't the affair itself. It wasn't the betrayal or the humiliation or the public nature of this disaster. It was that Jessica was right. He was about to lie again. He was about to try to minimize it, to excuse it, to gaslight me into thinking this wasn't as bad as it seemed. That was the moment when everything crystallized for me. I'd spent so much time not seeing what was in front of my face. I'd made excuses and denied reality and convinced myself that maybe I was the problem. And here, in front of everyone who mattered to me, I was being confronted with the truth so starkly that I couldn't hide from it anymore. "You're lying," David said to Jessica, and his voice was desperate and panicked. "I'm not," Jessica said. She pulled out her phone. "Do you want me to show them the texts? The pictures? The hotel receipts? The jewelry he bought me with money he said he was using for the mortgage?" At that point, one of the security guards approached her. Our venue had booked security, which in retrospect seems hilarious, as if they could have anticipated that the groom's mistress would show up and destroy a vow renewal ceremony. "I think you need to leave," the guard said. "I'm going," Jessica said. She looked at me one more time. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I didn't want it to be like this. But he wasn't going to tell you. He was never going to tell you. He was just going to keep living this double life until one of us finally forced the truth." She walked back down the aisle. As she passed my mother actually stood up and applauded, slowly and deliberately, her face hard with anger. That was somehow both the funniest and saddest thing that happened that entire day. Jessica left the garden, the doors closed behind her, and then there was just me, David, and 75 people whose mouths were hanging open as they tried to process what they just witnessed. "Sarah," David said, "I can explain." I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. And then I turned and I walked out of the botanical garden, still wearing my white dress, still wearing the flowers in my hair. I walked past all our guests. I didn't make eye contact with anyone. I felt like I was in a movie. Like at any moment, someone would yell, "Cut!" And I'd realize that this wasn't real. But it was real. I drove around the city for 3 hours that night. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. I cried so hard I had to pull over several times because I couldn't see the road. The betrayal was bad enough, but what really destroyed me was realizing how long he'd been lying to me. 18 months. That's not a mistake. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a choice he made every single day for a year and a half. That's lying in bed next to me at night, holding me, telling me he loved me, while he was in another woman's bed doing the same things. It was the premeditation of it that broke something in me. My phone started ringing after about an hour. David was calling, texting. My mother was texting. My best friend was texting. Everyone was in crisis mode, trying to understand what had just happened. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and I sat in a booth by myself. A waitress, who recognized that something was deeply wrong, brought me coffee without asking and didn't charge me for it. She didn't ask questions. She just left me there to fall apart in a red vinyl booth under fluorescent lights. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to run, I wasn't going to hide, and I wasn't going to let David control the narrative. I texted my mother and told her to come meet me at the diner. I texted Maya. I texted my therapist, because yes, I have a therapist, even though I'm a therapist myself, and asked for an emergency session. I texted my lawyer, someone I'd gone to law school with, and asked for his recommendation for a family law attorney. And then I sat there in that diner, and I figured out what I needed to do. The thing about infidelity that nobody tells you is that it's not just about sex. It's not just about another woman. It's about a profound betrayal of trust. It's about realizing that someone knew how to hurt you the most and they did it anyway. But what I realized in that diner was that I had power in this situation too. I had the power to walk away with dignity. I had the power to refuse to be a victim. I had the power to stand up for myself and take control of my own narrative. By the time my mother arrived at the diner, I had my plan. "We need to talk," I told her, "about everything. And then we need to talk about what happens next." My mother sat down across from me and she took my hand. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said. "I know," I said, "but I'm not going to fall apart over this. I'm not going to be the sad, betrayed wife who hides away. I'm going to be the woman who refused to accept a lie and built something better for herself." My mother smiled, a sad, proud smile. "That's my girl," she said. Over the next few days, I did things very deliberately. First, I met with a divorce attorney. I got all my ducks in a row legally. I found out what I was entitled to, what I needed to do to protect myself financially, what my options were. Information is power, and I was going to be as powerful as possible. Second, I went to a therapist, not as a therapist, but as a patient. I needed to talk through my feelings with someone who wasn't emotionally invested in my marriage surviving. I needed to understand how I'd gotten to a place where I was ignoring so many red flags. Third, I had a conversation with David, but not the kind of conversation he was expecting. David came home after 2 days of me ghosting him. He looked terrible. He hadn't slept. He hadn't shaved. He looked like a man whose entire world had imploded. "Where have you been?" he asked. "Figuring out my life," I said. We were standing in the kitchen of the home we'd built together. This kitchen where he'd made me breakfast 1,000 times, where we'd cooked dinner together while dancing to music playing from his phone, where we'd made plans and promises and dreamed about a future that apparently he'd been sabotaging the entire time. "I can explain," he said. "I don't want your explanation," I said. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want you to tell me it didn't mean anything, or that you were going through something, or that Jessica seduced you. None of that matters anymore." "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying that I've realized something important over the past 2 days," I said. "I'm saying that I spent so much time trying to make excuses for your behavior, trying to minimize what I was seeing, trying to convince myself that I was the one being paranoid. But the truth is, I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew exactly what was happening, and I chose not to see it." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Let me finish," I said. And I realized that I've been teaching myself, and my own patience, by the way, to accept less than I deserve, to make accommodations for people who hurt me, to prioritize their comfort over my own well-being. "Sarah, please." "I've filed for divorce," I said. The words hung in the air between us. "You what?" "I've filed for divorce," I repeated. "My attorney will be sending you the papers. We're going to split our assets fairly. I'm not trying to take you for everything, even though I could, but I am walking away." His face crumpled. "I love you," he said. "No, you don't," I said. "Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't spend 18 months lying and cheating. Love doesn't profess devotion while actively betraying it." "I made a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake," I said. "A mistake is something that happens once, unexpectedly. You made a choice. Every single day for 18 months, you chose to lie to me. You chose to go to that hotel. You chose to buy her jewelry. You chose to let me stand at the altar in front of everyone we care about and promise to spend the rest of my life with you while you were actively destroying that life." I moved to the window, looking out at the backyard we'd landscaped together. "I spent so many years trying to make this work," I continued. "I made myself smaller. I made excuses. I ignored warning signs. And for what? So I could be comfortable? So I wouldn't have to face the fact that the person I loved wasn't who I thought he was?" "Please don't do this," David said. "Please. We can work through this. We can go to couples counseling. We can fix this." I turned to face him. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "There's nothing to work through. This is broken beyond repair, and honestly, I think a part of me has known that for a while. I think a part of me chose you even though I knew I shouldn't, and I'm done doing that." "What about us?" he asked. "What about the life we built?" "The life we built was a lie," I said. "And I deserve better than that. I deserve a partner who chooses me every single day, not one day a week or most days, every single day." I left him standing in that kitchen. I spent the next 3 weeks in my parents' guest room. I didn't go back to the house immediately. I needed distance and space to process everything. My therapist helped me understand that what I was experiencing was a kind of grief. I was grieving the marriage I thought I had. I was grieving the future I thought I was going to have. I was grieving the version of my husband that I'd believed in, even when reality was telling me differently. But I was also discovering something else during that time: relief. As strange as it might sound, there was a sense of relief in not having to pretend anymore. There was relief in not having to make excuses for his behavior, or justify his absence, or wonder if I was being paranoid. The truth, as painful as it was simpler than the lie had ever been. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause here and say something to you directly. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you're sensing that something isn't right in your relationship, I need you to hear this. Trust that feeling. It exists for a reason. I spent so many months ignoring my intuition because I didn't want to believe what it was telling me. I was afraid of the truth, and that fear cost me years of my life that I could have used to move forward, to heal, to rebuild. You don't have to have proof. You don't have to have concrete evidence. If something feels wrong, that's information. That's valuable data. That's your nervous system telling you that something is off. Please, and I'm speaking directly to anyone watching this who feels that nagging sense of wrongness, please reach out to someone. Talk to a therapist. Talk to a trusted friend. Call a counselor at a hotline if you need to. Don't do what I did. Don't spend months or years trying to convince yourself that everything is fine when something is clearly not fine. Your intuition is not a burden. Your feelings are not paranoia. You deserve to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't make you feel like you're going crazy. And if you're resonating with this story, if you're finding yourself in a similar situation, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's an entire community of people who understand what you're going through, and there's a path forward. It's painful. Yes, it's scary, absolutely, but it's worth it. I'm going to leave some resources in the description of this video. Numbers you can call, websites you can visit, communities you can join. Please use them if you need to. And if this video is helping you process your own situation, or if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share it. Your share might be the thing that helps someone else finally take action. Your share might be the reason someone finally leaves a situation that was slowly destroying them. That would mean everything to me. Now let me tell you about what came after the breaking point. Because this story doesn't end with the divorce. This story gets better from here. The divorce process took about 6 months total. In the grand scheme of divorces, mine was relatively straightforward. We didn't have kids. We didn't have a ton of complicated assets. But emotionally, it was brutal. There were moments when I'd be sitting in my attorney's office going over financial documents, and I'd just start crying. These were documents detailing 12 years of financial entanglement with another person. Bank accounts we'd opened together, investments we'd made together, a mortgage we'd signed together with a pen that probably cost less than $1, and I was watching all of it get divided like a business dissolution. David wanted to keep the house. I was fine with that. I signed away my interest in it. I took a small chunk of our liquid assets, enough to get by while I figured out my next steps. I didn't want to fight with him. I didn't want to be bitter or vindictive. I just wanted out. My attorney warned me that I was being too generous. She said I could push for more. She said that given his infidelity and the circumstances of our separation, the court would likely rule in my favor on a lot of things. I don't care, I told her. I just want to be done. What I really meant was, I want to stop being married to this man. I want to stop having a legal connection to this person who hurt me. I want to be free of him in every way that matters. And if giving him the house, if taking less money, if making the process easier for everyone involved allows me to achieve that freedom faster, then it's worth it. Some people thought I was being too soft on him. My mother thought I should have fought for more. Maya told me I was being a pushover. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't being soft. I was being strategic. Every dollar I spent on legal fees, every month I extended the divorce, every fight I picked, that was me giving him more of my energy, more of my time, more of my life. I was choosing a clean break over a protracted war. I was choosing my own peace over vengeance. And you know what? That decision ended up being the most powerful thing I did throughout the entire process. We finalized the divorce on a rainy Tuesday in November. David didn't show up to court. His attorney appeared on his behalf. I sat in that courtroom and I watched the judge review the paperwork, and then she looked at me and said, "Ms. Thompson, you are hereby divorced from David Chen. The court has finalized the terms as outlined in the settlement agreement." That was it. In the eyes of the law, it was over. But I remember sitting in my car in the courthouse parking lot after that, and I thought, that's not actually when it ends. It ends when I decide it ends. The next few months were a blur of practical tasks. I moved into my own apartment. Not something huge or fancy, a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood I'd always liked but never explored. I furnished it slowly, buying pieces that felt like they belonged to me. Not pieces that David and I had agreed on, but things that made my heart happy when I looked at them. I painted the walls a warm taupe color. I bought plants, lots of plants, because I realized I'd been too afraid to have anything that required maintenance in the house, because I was too busy managing the emotional maintenance of a failing marriage. But now, watering plants felt meditative. Watching them grow felt like a metaphor I needed. I threw myself into my work. I'd taken a leave of absence from my therapy practice during the worst of the divorce, but I came back to it with a renewed sense of purpose. My patients, particularly the ones going through relationship difficulties, suddenly felt like people I could truly help because I'd lived through it myself. My therapist, Dr. Chen, no relation to David, pointed out that I was using my career as a way to escape processing my emotions. And she was right. So I started setting boundaries. I started leaving my office at the end of the day and actually living my life instead of constantly analyzing what had happened to me. I also started reaching out to Jessica. My therapist thought this was a terrible idea at first. She asked me what I was hoping to accomplish. "I don't know," I told her. "But I feel like there's a conversation we need to have that wasn't had that day in the garden." We met at a coffee shop 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I almost didn't recognize her without the red dress and the dramatic entrance. In person, alone, she was just a woman. A woman who had made poor choices, like we all do sometimes. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to meet me," she said, sitting down across from me. "I wasn't sure I would either," I said, "but I realized something. I was angrier at you than I was at David, and I think it's because hating you was easier than hating him." She nodded slowly. "For what it's worth," she said, "I didn't know he was married." "Not at first." "But when you found out?" I asked. She looked away. "I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that he was going to leave you anyway. I told myself that what we had was real and that none of the rest mattered." She looked back at me. I was lying to myself. Obviously. But that's what people do when they want something badly enough. They tell themselves convenient lies. "Did you love him?" I asked. "I thought I did," she said. "But I think I loved the version of him that he was when he was with me. I loved the attention. I loved feeling special. I loved that he'd take me to nice restaurants and tell me I was beautiful. I didn't love the part where he was a serial liar who was betraying his wife." She paused. I think I had to separate those two things in my mind. The man who was kind to me and the man who was cruel to you. And that's not fair. Those are the same person. I appreciated her honesty more than I expected to. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said. "I just want you to understand what it was like. Being me. Being on the other side of this." And then I told her. I told her about the red flags I missed. I told her about the time in that botanical garden. I told her about the house we'd built together and the dreams we'd had, and the way my mother had applauded as she walked back down the aisle. She cried, and I think she actually meant it. "For what it's worth," she said when I was done, "I'm not with him anymore. We broke up about 3 months after you served him with divorce papers." I'm not sure why, but hearing that mattered. It mattered to know that what they had wasn't this great love story that was waiting in the wings. It was a lie that fell apart under any kind of real pressure. "Are you sorry?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I think I am. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I was part of something that broke your life apart. I'm sorry that I was so selfish. I looked at her for a long moment. I forgive you, I said. I meant it. Not for her sake, but for mine. Because carrying anger toward her was keeping me attached to the whole situation, and I was ready to let it go. After we parted ways, I never saw Jessica again. We didn't exchange phone numbers or promise to stay in touch, but I felt lighter walking out of that coffee shop than I had in a long time. Here's what happened next, and this is the part I almost didn't tell anyone. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, David reached out to me. He sent me an email saying that he wanted to talk, that he'd been in therapy, and that he understood now what he'd done, that he wanted to apologize properly. My first instinct was to delete the email. I didn't owe him anything. I didn't need to hear his apologies. I had already processed what he'd done and moved on, but something made me respond. Maybe it was closure I was looking for. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see if the man in that email was the same person I'd married, or if therapy had actually changed him in some fundamental way. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a park near my apartment. When David arrived, he looked different. Not just physically, though he did look different. Thinner, older, like someone who'd spent the past year wrestling with his own demons. But there was something in his energy that was different too. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "You're welcome," I said, "though I'm not sure this is a good idea." "I know," he said. "I don't expect anything from this. I'm not hoping that you'll take me back, or that we'll be friends or anything like that. I just wanted to see you and tell you that I understand what I did to you." We sat on a bench overlooking the pond. "I've been in therapy twice a week for the past 8 months," he continued. "I've been trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I was willing to hurt you like that. Why I lied for so long." "Why did you?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "Because I was afraid," he finally said. "I was afraid that you were too good for me. I was afraid that eventually you'd figure out that I wasn't who you thought I was. So I started looking for someone else, someone I could be less than my best with, someone I could be mediocre with and it wouldn't matter." "That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm telling you." He looked at me. "I destroyed something beautiful because I was too much of a coward to just tell you that I was struggling. I could have been honest with you about my doubts. I could have suggested we go to couples counseling. I could have done 1,000 things, but instead I had an affair and I lied about it, and I let you waste years of your life trying to make a marriage work with someone who was actively sabotaging it." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I know I don't deserve that. But I needed you to know that I understand what I did, that it wasn't about you. It was never about you not being enough. It was about me being too broken to accept being loved the way that you loved me." And I realized something in that moment. I believed him. I believed that he meant what he was saying. I believed that he'd done some work and had some genuine insight into his own behavior. But it didn't change anything. The betrayal was still the betrayal. The years I'd wasted were still wasted. The trust I'd lost was still lost. Understanding his motivations didn't undo the damage he'd caused. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, "but it doesn't actually change anything for me." "I know," he said. "I didn't expect it to." "You hurt me," I continued. "Badly. And you can understand why you did it. You can do therapy and gain insight and change your patterns. But that doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't make me unbetrayed." "No," he said, "it doesn't." "I'm glad you're working on yourself," I said. "I'm glad you're trying to be better. For your own sake and for the sake of anyone else you might have a relationship with. But I need you to understand that you don't get to do the work and then have that be enough for me. That's not how this works." He nodded. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," I said. "Are you happy now, after all of this?" I thought about the question. I thought about my apartment with the taupe walls and the plants I was learning to nurture. I thought about my therapy practice where I was helping people navigate their own traumas. I thought about my body, which I was finally taking care of without the weight of his presence making me feel self-conscious. I thought about the future, which was uncertain but entirely mine. "Yeah," I said, "I'm happy. It took a while to get here, but I'm actually happy. Good, he said. I'm glad. And I think he meant it. We talked for a few more minutes about surface-level things. How was his job? How was my family? Where was I living? Those kinds of things. The kind of small talk you make with someone you used to know. And then we said goodbye. Not in a dramatic way. We just stood up and we hugged briefly, and then we walked in opposite directions. I never saw David again after that day. About a year later, I heard through mutual friends that he'd gotten engaged to someone else. Part of me hoped he'd learned from his mistakes. I hoped he wasn't going to repeat the same patterns, but mostly, I just didn't think about it anymore, because that was the moment I realized I was free. I was free not just of the marriage, but of him. He was no longer the central figure in my narrative. He was just someone who'd been in my life for a while. The 2 years that followed the divorce were the most transformative years of my life. I did things I'd never done before. I took a solo trip to Europe. 2 weeks where I just wandered around, got lost intentionally, sat in cafes and read books, and no one knew who I was or what I'd been through. It was glorious. I changed my career slightly. Instead of just doing individual therapy, I started running support groups for women going through divorce. I specialized in helping women navigate the emotional aftermath of infidelity. And let me tell you, there was no shortage of women who needed to talk about it. I dated a little, not a lot, but a little. Some of it was good. Some of it was terrible. There was one person I thought might turn into something, but after a few months, I realized that I wasn't ready. I was still too busy rebuilding myself to take on someone else. And that was okay. For the first time in my adult life, I was okay with being alone. I wasn't desperate to be partnered. I wasn't willing to accept less than I deserved just so I could say I was in a relationship. I got a cat, a gray tabby named Philosopher, because he has this very serious expression like he's pondering the meaning of existence. He's obnoxious and demanding, and I love him. I discovered hobbies that were entirely my own. I started taking photography classes. I took a pottery class and I was absolutely terrible at it, but I loved it anyway. I read books that I wanted to read instead of books that David wanted to read. My friendships deepened because I actually had time and energy for them. Maya and I became even closer. We took a vacation together. We had long conversations about life and love and what we wanted from our futures. She became not just my best friend, but my confidant. My relationship with my family shifted too. I'd always been somewhat distant with them, trying to maintain some independence. But going through the divorce showed me how much I needed them. And being vulnerable with them actually brought us closer instead of pushing us apart. My mother and I started having weekly brunches. We talked about her marriage, which it turns out had also gone through a rough patch years ago. She told me stories about her doubts and her fears, and I realized that I'd inherited a lot of her patterns. We worked through some of that together. My therapist helped me understand that I'd internalized some messages from my childhood, that love meant sacrifice, that partnership meant losing yourself, that you had to be responsible for making sure your partner was happy. These are messages that had made me susceptible to David's manipulation and willing to ignore red flags. I spent a lot of time unpacking that stuff, a lot of time understanding my own role in what had happened. And here's what I learned, and this is important. Being betrayed is not your fault, but how you respond to betrayal is your choice. I couldn't control David's decision to cheat. I couldn't control his decision to lie. I couldn't control Jessica showing up that day at the botanical garden. But I could control what I did after. I could control whether I took back less in the divorce to punish him. I could control whether I stayed angry forever or whether I worked toward forgiveness, not for his sake, but for mine. I could control whether I let this one bad marriage define my belief in love, or whether I stayed open to the possibility of something better in the future. And that's what I want you to understand if you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own betrayal crisis. What I've learned from all of this, and I mean really learned, not just intellectually understood, but viscerally, body level learned, is that first, trust your intuition. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You don't need proof. You don't need to wait for the other person to admit it. Your nervous system is smarter than your brain sometimes. Listen to it. Second, love is not the same as staying. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that they're not treating you right. Those two things don't have to be contradictory. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Third, there is no such thing as fixing a relationship that only one person wants to fix. David might have been willing to do therapy after the fact, but during the relationship, when it mattered, he wasn't willing to do anything differently. You cannot love someone into being faithful. You cannot therapize someone into treating you right. You can only choose whether to stay or go. Fourth, leaving someone is not a failure. This was huge for me. I'd internalized the message that relationships were things you had to make work no matter what, that wanting to leave was selfish, that a good woman would stay and try harder. But you know what I learned? Leaving someone who's hurting you is not selfish. It's an act of self-preservation. It's an act of self-love. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. And finally, the most important thing, you get to build a new life. The life after the betrayal doesn't have to be lesser than the life before. It can be different, yes. It can be uncertain, yes. But it can also be better. It can be more authentic. It can be more aligned with who you actually are instead of who you thought you had to be. This is what I discovered in the years after my marriage ended. My life is better now than it was before. And I don't say that because everything is perfect or easy, because it's not. I say it because it's mine, because I'm not performing for anyone, because I'm not trying to earn love by being smaller and quieter and more accommodating. I'm just being myself, and that turns out to be enough. Before I let you go, I want to tell you a few things. If you're watching this and you're currently in a relationship where you sense something is wrong, I'm begging you to take action. Don't do what I did. Don't spend months or years ignoring red flags. Talk to someone. Get support. Reach out to one of the resources I've included in the description. And if you're currently going through the aftermath of infidelity or betrayal, I want you to know that you're going to be okay. It doesn't feel like it now. But you are. You're going to survive this. You're going to grieve. You're going to be angry. You're going to have days where you think you can't go on. And then one day, you're going to realize that you can. And you will. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. There are so many people out there right now going through what I went through, feeling crazy and alone and like their world is ending. Your share might be the thing that helps someone finally take action. Your share might be the reason someone finds the courage to walk away from a situation that was destroying them. I also want to personally invite you to subscribe to Tin Tea Tales. We share real stories about real people going through real struggles. Each week, we explore the moments that changed people's lives. If you found yourself connecting with this story, I promise there are more like it here. Stories about love and loss and redemption and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Plus, when you subscribe, you'll get notified when we release new videos. And trust me, next week, we have a story that's going to absolutely blow your mind. While you're at it, please leave a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me if this resonated with you. Tell me what you're struggling with. I read every single comment, and I respond to as many as I can. This community we're building together is what makes this all worth it. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And finally, be gentle with yourself. If you're in the middle of a betrayal or a breakup or any kind of emotional crisis right now, please remember that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to move on quickly or get over it on anyone else's timeline. Healing is not linear. Some days you're going to feel amazing and think you've completely moved on. Other days you're going to fall apart. That's normal. That's okay. That's part of the process. You're going to be okay. I promise you that. Thank you so much for letting me share this story with you. Thank you for trusting me with this intimate part of my life. It means more to me than I can express. I'll see you next week on Tin Tea Tales, where we'll be exploring another story that will make you feel seen and heard and less alone. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.